Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to tonight's event, Talking Track with Curt Cavin and Scott Goodyear. My name is Sue Kennedy. I am chair of Indiana Automotive, which is a member affinity group of Indiana Landmarks. Indiana Automotive was founded in 2014 by Indiana Landmark members, and we celebrate the automotive heritage and promote preservation of Indiana's automotive landmarks. We're privileged to host annual events such as the one we're having this evening to explore Indiana's history with the automobile. As some of you may know, Talking Track in the past has welcomed many wonderful guests, including the one and only Donald Davidson, Sarah Fisher, Spike Gelhausen, Johnny Parsons Jr., Mark Miles, and Doug Bowles. We'll hear a bit more about tonight's program and guests in just a moment. If you are a fan of Indiana's automotive heritage, we hope you are also a fan of Indiana Landmarks. Since 1960, Indiana Landmarks has worked and continues to work to save Indiana's meaningful places. Once a year, Indiana Landmarks hosts a rescue party to raise money for Indiana Landmarks' Endangered Places program. It's a fund that offers grants, loans, advocacy, and strategy to help save historic structures and revitalize Hoosier communities across the state. You are invited to join us for this year's party, which is on Saturday, April 29th, here from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. The evening will include highlights of this year's 10 most endangered places, plenty of food and cocktails, and a live auction of one-of-a-kind Indiana experiences featuring historic locales. Plus, you'll see a different Hudson than the one you saw this evening. So please join us. You can visit indianalandmarks.org to learn more and purchase tickets. We are pleased to announce that registration is open for Indiana Automotive's annual summer tour. On Saturday, June 24th, we're headed to Lafayette and West Lafayette. The all-day tour will explore several places. First, the private auto collection of John Gams. Second, Lafayette's 5-Point Fire Museum, which is housed in a 1921 fire station, and we'll look at other downtown automotive landmarks repurposed for new uses. We'll have lunch at the historic Lafayette Theater and end the day with a guided tour and reception at Frank Lloyd Wright's designed home, Sonera. This was recently reopened to the public after a $2 million restoration headed by Indiana Landmarks. So visit indianalandmarks.org to reserve your tickets, and your spot on the tour. Space will be limited. As a special addition to tonight's event, Indiana Landmarks is offering a preview of tomorrow's First Friday art show, featuring paintings by Melinda Spear Huff and photography by Ron Weiss. You are welcome to go down to the Rapp Family Gallery in the lower level of this building after tonight's program to get an early look at an exhibit highlighting Indianapolis landmarks, including the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The show's opening reception is here tomorrow, April 7th, from 6 to 9 p.m. and is free, open to the general public. Before we get started on the main program, a few notes for attendees. We will reserve time at the end for questions and answers. For those tuning in via Zoom, look for Q&A on your screen. We'll try to take as many questions as time allows. To introduce tonight's guest, I invite Jason Van Sickle to the stage. He is the Vice Chair of Indiana Automotive and Vice President of Curation and Education at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. Jason also serves on the board of directors for the National Association of Automobile Museums. Jason?
Thank you, Sue. Good evening. Well, tonight I have the honor to introduce two stalwarts at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in two different roles, but they're almost synonymous with the event themselves. Longtime writer and editor at the Indianapolis Star and INDYCAR, and a veteran of on-air television and radio work, Curt Cavin will work his 37th consecutive Indianapolis 500 in May. The co-host of Trackside with Curt and Kevin, a nationally acclaimed radio show, talk show based on Indianapolis, Cavin currently works for Penske Entertainment, writing and telling stories of IndyCar Series in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And then our featured guest tonight, Canadian former race car driver Scott Goodyear drove in the Indy Racing League and Champ Car Series from 1987 until his retirement in 2001, winning the Michigan 500 in 1992 and 1994, and qualifying for 11 runnings of the Indianapolis 500 from 1990 to 2001. Goodyear's second place finish behind Unser Jr. in the 1992 remains still today the closest finish in Indianapolis 500 history. He was inducted to the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame in 2002 and the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame in 2014. After racing, he has a long time history in broadcast with ABC and recently has become a steward for the F4 series. So I'd like to introduce both Curt and Scott to the stage. Thank you.
So they told me that Donald Davidson wouldn't be here, which was a big stress relief. They just didn't tell me Jason was going to be here, because when you talk about history, Jason knows, more than most of us, maybe more than all of us. But anyway, good to see you.
You too. I mean, we got a chance to catch up yesterday at the Fox studio, and obviously we're still doing motor racing, both of us, but in different venues now. So it's nice to be able to get back and catch up with folks. So it was nice for us to catch up yesterday and then do our segment on Fox 59.
Yeah, this will be fun, I think. I hope this is a segment of two guys that love the Indy 500, who love IndyCar racing, who love Indianapolis, and we can talk about all kinds of things related to the race and your career, and we'll take questions later on.
Just before we start, though, I just want to clarify one thing. But
you really did beat Unser Jr.?
Well, no, it was close to. How'd you know that subject was going to come up? How about that, huh? No, but he said behind Unser Jr. It was beside.
I know.
Unser
It was
Jr.
beside.
Okay, just want to make sure we clarify that. Yeah, and as I said to Al many times, and Al's been part of our series over the last couple of years for the F3 and F4. And every time I see him, I look at him and I go like that, and he goes like that, and I go, side by each, I must get some of that prize money, right? And he looks at me, he goes, no.
So if I said 0.043, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I wondered, I told my wife, I said, how am I going to go 75 minutes with Scott Goodyear and not mention 1992? But I suspect, and we go to the museum frequently, that seems to play every time I walk in the museum. Does it still grate on you? Does it grate on you, on your nerves, or is it just something to be proud of?
I think at this point in time, it's something that you're proud of. And it sounds weird to say that because when you look back in 1992, the emotions that were there and, the picture that came out, with the tear and what have you, it's interesting because it was an emotional day. And when I look back on that, it's now very, very much a proud day, and as we were chatting yesterday, it's interesting because as IndyCar has grown over the years and taking on races either in Brazil or Japan or whatever the scenario is, all the drivers end up getting fan mail because you've got a whole new host of fans, obviously. So they research the sport and they turn around and they find out about information about the racing and what have you, and especially the Indy 500. And then all of a sudden they find things for you to sign. So it's interesting, even today, you still get stuff coming in that is still wrapped around 1992. I mean, it was a long time ago, but I mean, the young fans still get it. So they're learning the sport and the history is still there. So, and the stories always go, I was there on that day and did you know it was super cold and all that sort of stuff. It's interesting how it is. And you know, but it makes me go back and relive it. And, but you know, in 1992, I was starting at the very back and I was
Yeah, you
just hoping-
started 33rd in that race.
Yeah.
The thing is, about lap 190, you surely had no idea that something like that was going to materialize because Michael had the race. That was as good of a
Mhm.
whooping
You know,
as
it was.
anybody had put on the field in some time.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, you're handed this golden opportunity. Do you remember the moment they said Michael's out?
Well, I remember even a moment before that because Derek Walker was my team owner that year. And I remember getting on the radio because I'm looking at my dash and I was second at the time because I had not been passed by Al at that point in time. And I knew Michael was out there somewhere. And so I got in the radio and I said, Derek, you know, how far is Michael ahead? What's his speed? And I'm doing 223, maybe 224. And I'm thinking, this is pretty good, right? Let me check. Let me check. Have a couple of laps go by and I'm going, hey, where is he? How far? And that sort of stuff. And he wouldn't give me an answer on that. And then finally he just got on the horn and just said, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job. I come to find out later, Michael's at 226, 227. He's leaving us and there was no chance of ever catching him. So that was a funny lead up to that. And then, yeah, I remember when it came down to the restart because I had just been passed by Al Jr. in traffic coming out of turn 2.
And you're thinking that moment, that was the moment.
That was the moment. Yeah. You know, and coming out of the turn, I had to go down a gear and it was really slow traffic and got going again. I saw him coming in the mirrors. I moved just a little bit and didn't move enough, obviously, and got passed by him. But then a few laps later, that became the move that actually dictated what was going on. Yeah.
If you'd only had just a little bit longer straightaway till the flag was down at the end of the. Could you got him at the end or?
Well, you know, and it's funny because people always talk about 92, 95 and 97.
I wasn't going to talk about 95.
I don't mind talking about 95. But you know, I look at that. I didn't do ovals when I was racing junior formulas. I was racing in Canada, went to Europe a lot. And my first real oval experience was in an IndyCar at Phoenix, getting ready to start IndyCar full time for the 1990 season. And my teammate that year was R.A. Leyendyke, which great teammate to have. And we were with Doug Shearson Racing. And then as the winter went on and we were about ready to start the 1990 season, Ari got awarded a Honda engine. Honda engine. We use Honda engines in our F3 and F4 series. So I got Honda on the brain, a Chevrolet engine. And I still had the Judd engine. So we ended up having to separate the team and have a satellite team because you couldn't have 2 engine manufacturers in one shot. But I had Ari every time we went testing and got to learn from him. And I mean, what a great teacher for ovals, as it was, obviously. Went through the first day of testing and I was a good 7/8 of a second away, which at Phoenix is like, you know, you might as well be in a different state. And thought about it at night and came back the next morning and I thought, I got to get going faster. But not that you always remember these sort of things, but 10:38 the next morning is when I first hit the wall in an IndyCar at Phoenix in turn 1. And I thought, okay, this is not going to work. You can't drive this thing like you're driving a road course car. So I really went to work and try to understand what's going on with ovals and car setup and what have you, because I never did that, as I mentioned, with my training. But I still didn't have enough training and oval experience for 1992 because Al had been there since I think 1983. Grew up doing Super V and all the oval experience, what have you. And he's part of the Unser family, obviously. You know, not that that's playing in your mind when you're out there running, but you know, but I go back and look at that shortly after that in the years after 1992. And I watch where I'm at with the car and where I'm moving and all that sort of stuff. And I'm going, what are you doing? Okay. I mean, you shouldn't be here. When you get more knowledge, you understand about what you should be doing with the car. But I had never been through that before. Never been through a dogfight like that. I learned a lot about dirty air coming off the car in front, where not to place your car. And, you know, we were flat on the peg and, you know, it was just his little, as he says, breathing the throttle in turn 4 that gave us a run coming down to the front stretch. So yeah, needed to be one more lap for sure.
Yeah, dogfight is a great word. We remember that we hadn't seen a lot of action like that prior to 92. A little bit with Mears and John Cock in 82.
Right.
We had seen a little of that, but we hadn't seen it quite to the extent that you two put on. Let's skip forward just a hair before, for those that don't know this. You won, not only did you have this moment when you said you weren't good enough in May of 92, maybe to win that race or experienced enough on ovals. You came back and won at one of the toughest ovals in terms of a dogfight at Michigan later that year.
Right.
2 years later, you win again at Michigan. You won at Phoenix. I don't know if you'll say this, but I think it's got to be one of the toughest ovals in the land.
Yeah.
And then you won 2 races in the Indy Racing League at Texas. And we just watched that over the weekend. That's big boy stuff.
Texas is, and I've not seen it because I was away on the weekend, but I'm going to go back and watch it. And I've read all the reports that this Texas race was great. So I'm anxious to go watch it. You know, we lived through the 2x2x2 or in the early Texas days when the cars are side by each and
Interlocked almost.
Interlocked. And, you know, a quick story on that. I remember it being there for the first year and I was on the outside, like in fourth, and, you know, they kept saying pit in 10 for fuel, right? And so, which is normal. You're going to pit in 10, pit in 5, and then pit in 4 like that. Well, then they got to, okay, you're going to pit in 4, and you know how fast you're going around Texas. And I'm thinking, I'm on the outside.
Can't get there.
I can't get there. And it was Sharp that was beside me, and he dove in, and then I pulled over, and that was so I learned pretty quick after 92 of not learning maybe so fast, but after that, I mean, every time I came out of the pit lane, anytime we got close to being the last quarter distance for fuel run, I made sure I was on the inside because you couldn't actually, you can't maneuver. It was just 2x2x2. It was insanity. I go back and look at it now and how close it was. And yeah, you rubbed tires and did the stuff that you did. So I'm anxious to see the weekends because I keep hearing that it was a great show.
I wanted to point out Texas, 2 at Michigan, Phoenix. They always say, and rightfully so, that Mike Landretti was the best driver who never won the Indy 500. He's at least in that conversation of of 2 or 3 people. And if that's tier 1, you're knocking at the door already. You've had 3 really good chances to win the Indy 500, and most people never get one. So I wanted to establish that. We don't have to talk about 95, but it how do you have that conversation with this man? But anyway,
I know exactly what it is. When Steve Horn called me and just said, you need to pit, you're getting black flag. And I pushed the button on the steering wheel and I said, Steve, I'm not coming in. It was quiet for a second, and then he goes, okay, then. That's as easy as that was.
Yeah. So there were.
And then speaking of Steve Horn, Steve is now back in New Zealand, as you know. And Steve won the Indy 500 with Ray Hall and obviously ran the Honda program, and just a wealth of knowledge, that individual. He is now working with a young up and coming driver, Callum Hedge, who is running in our F3, F4 category, and he's out of New Zealand. And so I've been speaking to Steve a lot this winter, and he's now sent this driver to our series that we had our first event at New Orleans Motorsport Park just last month. And Steve is coming in May to come to our next event at Road America. So I suspect you're going to probably see him down at the Speedway.
Yeah, he's coming to the Speedway.
Yeah.
So let's establish where you first really became introduced to us as IndyCar fans. In the summer of '87, we go racing at the Meadowlands, which was not one of the most decorated racetracks IndyCars ever raced on, but it didn't have a railroad tracks through the middle of it, like Baltimore, like San Jose.
Yeah, that was my first event, and I thought, what have I got myself into?
I was going to ask you, first of all, you started, interestingly enough, you started on the 10th row. I went back and watched the race. They never mentioned you, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
They never showed your photo.
Shouldn't have way back then. Yeah, I think.
So you're starting on the middle of the, on the 10th row alongside, you remember?
I do not.
Derek Daly.
Okay.
So you're starting next to Derek Daly, a couple guys living on the north side of Indy.
Yeah.
Do you remember, remember who won the race?
I do not, but I think I actually went out because I think I clipped the wall, if I can recall.
You did. You clipped the wall because I read about it, but they don't show it on the broadcast.
Okay. When you're that that far back, you don't get shown in the broadcast yet.
They also didn't interview you because I wanted to ask you if you knew who the broadcast team was very interesting in its own right.
I do not know.
So Paul Page is the play-by-play.
Okay, good.
Jackie Stewart is the color commentator.
Wow, okay.
Gary Gerald, one of the most
yeah.
respected men in all of broadcasting. By the way, just won. Well, he didn't win, but he announces Sacramento Kings game. They made the first playoffs for the first time in like 16 years.
I saw that. Yeah.
And the other pit reporter was, anybody remember? Bruce Jenner.
Okay, there you go.
I was waiting for Bruce Jenner.
Yeah. Okay.
I was waiting for Bruce Jenner to interview you on pit road. Never happened. But.
Yeah. I did a race at the 24-hour, and Bruce Jenner was on my team.
Oh,
Yeah. And I came on out of Canada, and this is back in the 80s. And obviously with his success and just athletic success, and it's just amazing. The state police, that he must have had 3 or 4 around him, escorting him everywhere. It was really impressive. Yeah, but a great guy. I mean, he just seemed to enjoy the sport and loved racing. Lots of questions about cars and racing and that sort of stuff.
So watching the 87 race, it really brought me squarely to the group of people that you raced with. I mean, you think about the span from 87 to 2001. Through the 90s, obviously had a whole host of characters, but in 87, you're still racing with Big Al. You're still racing with Little Al, obviously. By the way, they called him Young Unser and Young Andretti, not really Michael and Al Jr. They call him Young Unser. But you had Sneva, and you still had, you had a great opportunity there to kind of race with some people. Mears obviously still in the height of his career. Which ones were helpful to you? Which ones were particularly impactful in your career?
Well, I'll tell you, because I did a couple races in 87. Don't think I did anything in 88. A couple more races in 89. Then I got full time in 1990, if I can recall.
You mentioned Ari, but who else was impactful?
And just going to a driver's meeting for this kid out of Canada to sit there and look around there, and all the names that you mentioned. And, there's Mario, which is like royalty. And I'm I'm just looking around there, and the Sullivans and the Fittipaldis and the Halls and all that sort of stuff. I'm going, what am I doing here? Okay. It's just like, you're overwhelmed with what you see, but it was an opportunity just to get in there and drive the car. I was with a team with Dick Hammond at that time that owned it and called Genesee Beer Wagon, because
the beer wagon.
Yeah. And, I got a chance to do that in an event in Canada in Rothman's colors. So it was neat just to get in there and get your feet wet, sort of to say. And, and I'd be in my mid-20s at that point.
You're 26.
26, yeah.
Think about how young Colton Herta
I know.
And Christian Lundgaard and David Malukas.
Right.
Stingray Robb. Stingray Robb and David Malukas still don't add up to some of these guys' age. Will Power is 42. Yeah. They are 21 each.
Yeah, and Malukas came through our series and ran with us in F3 and FR.
But you were 26 when you got to IndyCar.
So, and it's so much earlier. I mean, I didn't get into a Formula Ford until I was 20 years of age. My dad owned a motorcycle and snowmobile business in Toronto and a Kawasaki dealership in Skidoo and all that sort of stuff. And I grew up driving mini bikes and go-karts and went go-kart racing and everything of that nature. And really never thought that I'd be racing cars at any point in time. But, for me, coming out of Canada, I just wanted to see if I could go and try and make a living driving cars, and had the opportunities in Europe and got over there to do a couple of races with Porsche. In Porsche cars and what have you, and just getting to go and have a chance to go drive an IndyCar was an amazing thing. So for me, I look back on the career and I look at some of those races like that and think I started so late, but I didn't sit in a Formula Ford until I was 20. I went and got my dad to co-sign a $20,000 loan when I was 19 at we went to a couple of banks. They wouldn't do it, but it was actually at the Caduca Credit Union, which is in Toronto. And I got a loan for $20,000 to buy my first 1980 Formula 4 Crosley 40F, and with a motor and all that sort of stuff. And was working 3 jobs and just to go racing on the weekend. And you know, it was funny because I look back on it then and I tell these stories now to the young kids that are in our series. And I'm actually the race director for Formula 3 and Formula 4 in this country. It's a ladder system that goes to Formula 1. Kyle Kirkwood and Dave Malukas, we've got a lot of drivers that have come through the series that are now running IndyCar. Some of the drivers are in Europe and getting into Formula 3, trying to get into Formula 2. But, you know, it's interesting for me now because I tell all these young drivers, you know, I was like you guys are, a girl sitting in the, you know, in the driver's meeting. And so I fully understand what you guys are trying to achieve, but they're starting at 15. We've got kids that don't even have a driver's license and they're racing a car at 125 miles an hour in F4. And so I was, you know, I joined the series late. I finally paid my loan off in October of 1986, because I took my prize winnings from winning the North American Formula Atlantic Championship and paid my loan off in 1986. So I have no idea how much interest I paid, but it was, so I went racing to Formula 4 at a young age, and I could sleep in the back of my Datsun B210 or buy a new set of tires for my Formula 4 in the weekend. You know what I bought? I bought the tires, and but you start so late. And today, as you mentioned, Colton and the group, it's everything. I think in all sports is so much younger now. But it's fascinating. Even hockey, obviously, I pay attention to hockey. The kids are coming up and they're ready to get into, you know, the farm league of the NHL very early, and I think NBA is that way today. And not sure about baseball, but. Yeah, you got to eat, breathe, and sleep it, I guess, to be able to make it.
By the way, I'm still stuck on the fact that you said this fragment of your sentence. I was racing Porsches in Europe. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah, I would.
How about you let me do that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So let's talk about your first impressions of the Speedway. You get there, you drive into the tunnel like everybody else, and I assume had you watched many Indy 500s before you first set foot on the grounds?
Oh, absolutely.
But you know, so was it overwhelming or about what you expected, or?
The Indy 500s we would watch if we were home, but when we were racing go-karts, we were listening to it on the radio all the time, because we'd be at a track usually in New York State, because we'd come across the border and race go-karts there. I did go there in the 70s because my dad said he had a surprise for me. We were racing in Batavia, New York. And he said, we're not racing tomorrow, being Sunday. And I looked at him and I thought I did something wrong. I'm going, oh my God, you know. And he goes, no, I'm going to surprise you. We're going to, the boys are taking the trailer home, and we're going to get in the car and we're going to watch a race. Didn't tell me what it was. So I was like so excited all the way driving through the night to get to Indianapolis. And by the time we finally got here, I hadn't slept. And so you're going to laugh at this, but he got great tickets here on the front stretch there. And I fell asleep because I was awake all night, excited about I was going to go to a racetrack and didn't know which one it was.
So how old are you at this point?
I was probably 13, I think. Very young, 12, 13. Yeah. And, you know, but I was falling off asleep because I was so tired. But
so does that make that 72 or
73? I was there in 73.
73, an interesting, interesting year to be there.
Yeah. And so, you know, as a young lad, you see it and you retain it, I guess, what have you. But that was my first exposure to the Indianapolis 500. And then when I was getting close to thinking I might have a shot at coming here, I came and watched practice in 1989, because I thought I'd be able to come here in 1990, but had not been around and experienced a race. And, you know, you saw it in 73, but, so when I came to the Speedway and did my rookie orientation, Johnny Rutherford was the coach at that point in time. It took us around in the pace car and drove around slowly for a lap and talked about this and all that. And he said, okay, now we're going to get up and get going faster, you know. And I mean, I do it now just, you know, I think those guys were doing, you're sitting in the passenger seat and you are hauling the mail. And I'm thinking, looking at the speedometer, I'm thinking he's just chatting, one hand on the wheel and doing this sort of stuff. And And I'm feeling like, do I tell him how fast he's going? Does he know how fast he's going? Does he know we're coming up to a turn? Like, what's happening here like that? And obviously the cars can take it. And I didn't know it at that point in time, but I just thought, oh, this is not going to work out well. And no, so it was all fine and got through it. And it's funny, I've now done it after that fact, and you do much the same sort of thing. It's just sort of fun to get out there and scare the world out of somebody. But he was a great teacher, and so many things that he said throughout that rookie time really came true. About making sure you finish the race, being respectful of all the people around you. There wasn't the 60 or 100 mile an hour pit speed limit back then. It was absolutely crazy. When you're getting used to how fast you're going, not only the track, but also in the pit lane and the multiple pit stops. But he said the one thing that he said to me on the start, you listen to it, and as all young people do, and you think, it can't really be that bad. But that he was absolutely correct in the start. You get into the start and you go going down to turn one, and you'll take your foot off the gas and the car won't slow down because you're just being sucked along and towards turn one. It pulls you along. And I was like, wow, to a point where you think there's something wrong with the car. And it's hard to describe to somebody. You actually have to sit in the car and live it to understand it.
The thing that as I watch old tape, and like I said, I watched some in advance of this, is not so much the front straightaway or the corners, it's the pit road speed before they slowed the cars down.
Yeah.
And you watch, take Rick Mears or John Cock in 82, and John Cock is flying down the pit road, nearly runs over somebody. He passes them on the inside. He's got crew guys on this side, another car on the outside. That had to be as treacherous as turn one.
And you don't understand the danger of it because it's the norm. It's just the way that it is. I mean, you look at some of the changes we've had in the sport or the safety things. Like the Hans device. It's the most simplistic thing in the world. And why didn't somebody think of that sooner?
So it's a head and neck support system.
Yeah, that we're all wearing. And small things like that, which make a huge difference. And the pit speed limit, I guess they never thought about it, but it was insane. It was absolutely insane. I can remember going down the pit lane, you're just driving it and you're taking it all in because you've never done it before. And you're going, boy, I hope nobody pulls out because this is not going to turn out very well.
Well, you got crew guys over the wall, and there used to be in the area on driver's right, where the flag, guys
signboards,
signboards, and
with a short little one-tiered Armco barrier.
Yeah, there wasn't much protection for those guys. As the driver, you probably feel fearless. It doesn't, I've got a big car, I've got equipment, I've got helmets, I've got.
Yeah. They should have paid the signboard guys more money than the drivers because they were at more danger actually than the drivers in the car.
So slowing the cars down. This is literally a sore subject. I don't remember how many times you hit the wall at the Speedway. One I remember, 2001, which wasn't your fault.
Right. And which
was that it?
Which ended it. No. Got the turn 4 wall one time, came across and ended up hitting the attenuator.
Oh, that's right.
And then ended up, oddly enough, stopping down in the pit lane in Derek Walker's pit box and knocked myself out. And I awoke to Derek hitting me on my helmet going, Scotty, are you okay? Scotty. And it was like, okay. So it was like, oh, okay. So, and that one in 94 was my fault because I was driving a car that was it was on the verge of loose, but I was trying to get time out of it, and at that point in time, you're catching it many times and you think you're going to be okay. And in the end result, it went and I caught it and I thought I was fine. And the thing just picked up and walked itself. And I went, uh-oh. And then, and then it turned and caught that way and went towards the attenuator. And by the time I hit the outside wall, and then now I'm sliding towards the attenuator, it was just on an angle I could turn my head enough, and I saw the attenuator coming, and I just went, I gotta close my eyes.
So we see those. I think of the attenuator. We see them on the highway, and there's this, long piece of Armco barrier with a padding, but
Yeah.
It's like the old saying that's become old now after they put the safer barrier around the speedway and they say
Right.
that's a soft wall.
Yeah, no,
No, that's a steel.
yeah,
That's steel.
yeah,
I would think those hurt.
yeah. And, you know, and Texas crashes and Phoenix crashes, New Hampshire with Mario and I lost that one. So I was against the wall. Helicoptered out of Texas and what have you. But, you know, 90 in the last race in 2001, when I was running a car for Eddie Cheever for Infinity, everything started to happen in front of me. And I thought, I just might make this through. You know, as things are happening, you think a car is going to move. And I thought, and then it got closer. I remember thinking I might just get the front wing or something like that. And then it all went wrong. So that was
Sarah spun in turn 2 and came right into your path. And watching it now, there was no way you were going to make it.
But you're hopeful. I mean, you're looking at that, you're looking for a way out, right? It's just like, because we had a yellow at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then we went to a restart. I think it was like lap 7. You know, so we had just done a ton of testing with the Infinity engine, just did 580 miles at Texas or at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and with Dick Karen running the team. And I thought we had a really good shot at it. But, you know, and a side story on breaking backs, because that was my second broken back. When I crashed in Brazil, we had a rear wing failure. And crashed in Brazil and broke my back. And that was in turn 2. Got helicoptered out, got to the hospital. And then Dr. Trammell was the first guy to the car at that point in time, because we traveled with the safety crews, you know. And so he saw the impact and he knew it was pretty serious. And so the truck, as it always is coming towards us, and the door opens and the truck's not stopped yet. And Terry's feet are already on the ground and he's about ready to run towards the car. He comes straight up the front of the car on the front and looks at me, and he's like a foot away, and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I go, "Terry, I can't feel from my waist down." I go, "I don't know." It was like instantaneous, right? And so he goes, "Thought so." And then he made his motion or whatever he did, because I don't know what happened. All I know is they just ascended on the car, and there's a neck collar, the boards going in, and all that sort of stuff.
Don't they hit you with a hammer first?
Yeah, they might want to, because you're in pain. So out you come and all that sort of stuff, and you're in the helicopter and you get taken to the local hospital there. I got lots of stories in the local hospital.
Yeah, hospital in Brazil, that doesn't sound like the way to go.
No.
You should have that in Indianapolis.
Yeah, well, this is the first time that I think we went abroad. So it was the first time. And now I think, site visits are the norm now when they go to things, including hospitals and all that sort of stuff. They had not done that before. And I remember getting into the hospital there, and I said to and my manager, I said, when Dr. Trammell comes here later today, tell him that, I'm still woozy in the head, obviously, and I'm seeing, like spots in the ceiling. And my manager looked at me and he goes, "Those are not spots. Those are bugs on the ceiling. We're trying to get you out of here." True story. And I went, "Oh, okay, this is great." I could not leave there because Terry had to measure me and then get a brace made back here in Indy, like clamshell, so he could ship me back here to Methodist. And so I didn't leave there until Wednesday. And then there again, this is new to IndyCar. And I see Gary Dausch. Gary from Walker Racing. Yes, he knows this whole story. And so I couldn't leave. They wouldn't let me go on a normal airplane, right? Because I couldn't walk and all that sort of stuff. And then there wasn't going to send me, I guess, medevac at that point in time, because it wasn't done yet with IndyCar. It was sort of new to them going out outside of America. So anyways, they came up with the idea that they would send me back on the FedEx jet. And I would go up the top. And so all the equipment's on the bottom of the FedEx jet, and I'm going up the top, where they only have about 6 seats, which is usually first class. But that's where people, if they're traveling with circus animals, they tell me, and all sort of stuff, that's where these people hang out. And there's no amenities, there's no service crew, there's nothing. There's just a cooler on the ground and with water in it and all that sort of stuff, which I couldn't bend down to reach anyways. But the funny thing about this is, I guess some things weren't organized yet to have all the bills paid and everything like that, because it was so new. So it was like we were supposed to be getting and traveling from the hospital to get over to meet the FedEx jet and all that sort of stuff. And it's like delayed. It's like delayed an hour, and my manager's not around. And I'm going, "Okay, what's going on?" And he goes, we're finally going to get out of here." So he had to pay some of the bills with his American Express card so we could actually leave the hospital, because they were fearful that we were going to leave and not pay the bill because it wasn't sort of set up yet from the series.
Yeah.
So anyways, we go out, we get on a helicopter and take off and land beside the FedEx jet. And then, they put me on the ground, all that sort of stuff. And remember, I'm all braced up and, I could fall off a brick wall and not hurt myself from here to here, right? And so, so they land me on the tarmac and they drive me over to the 747. And then I look at it and go, there's all these stairs going up to the airplane. And I'm going, really? They go, sorry. That's what we got. So anyways, I go up these stairs and so anyways, we are stopping to get fuel in Venezuela, I guess. So we're leaving and we land and the crew is moving and all that sort of stuff. And they get a new crew coming on the FedEx jet. And then the new crew comes on and they're counting heads and they're going, we got 2 more people than we're supposed to have. What's going on here? Oh, he's like that and go, well, we're not going to America, so you'll have to get off. And my manager is going, well, we're not getting off. So it was then both of us getting down the steps on the airplane. And this is the middle of the night getting fuel. Finding the local office at this airport and going into there, getting on the phone to FedEx in Memphis, Tennessee, explaining to them who we are and what we're doing. Now, FedEx was the official travel company out of CART at that point in time. So we spent probably 15, 20 minutes in that office talking to them. Finally, via fax back then, we are signing a document they sent us that, we're allowed to be on the airplane, all that sort of stuff. Had to get that document. And Jeff, my manager, and I had to go back to the captain of the 747 with FedEx and say, here's your documentation and we can fly. So I was almost going to have to get off and sit there. It was the most bizarre thing. And I still couldn't believe it today. So the funniest thing about that whole thing is that finally I get back and get to town and with Terry Trammell and what have you. My wife holds a dinner for us later, and this is months later. And it was like at the end of the season and everything like that. And all my buddies come to the front door and my wife says, oh, you can, and I'm up and going and racing and all that sort of stuff now. And so she said, well, you go get the door. I go, okay, I go to the door and I open the door and all my couple of friends are standing there and they got big FedEx labels on their jackets and all that sort of stuff. We're here, we made it. And I'm going, yeah. So the other side of that story is my son, Michael, was born February 23rd. And this is in Brazil in March. My wife had just delivered Michael. We got home. We were home for about a week, and then I left to go to Brazil. And I did not know that she ended up going back in the hospital with a very serious situation, infection and what have you. And she didn't tell the team at all because it didn't get relayed to us. And I'm looking at Gary there. I mean, I didn't know anything in Brazil that my wife was back in the hospital. And my in-laws were over. They're English, so they're in from into the country. And so my mother-in-law goes with my wife into the hospital on St. V's up there, and because she's breastfeeding, and my father-in-law is staying home with our oldest son. And so my wife gets out of the hospital before I get back. But when she's in the hospital, she gets the message and the phone call that, oh, your husband's crashed. He's broke his back and he's in Brazil. And so the interesting thing with that is that she was now back home. I land. Finally, I get home after whatever it was, a week or so. And this did not come out until conversation till a couple of weeks later. And she goes, oh, by the way, when you were in Brazil, I went back in the hospital. And she told me this whole story, nice. Which was completely bizarre. And where I'm leading to with this in 2001. So I crash here. My wife's here, obviously. So I get transported down 16th Street, which when you got a broken back is very bumpy, by the way. Okay. It's not like hitting the wall is more pleasurable than going down 16th Street at that point in time. So we get into Methodist and, they do all the x-rays and all this sort of stuff. And the doctor comes and he's got the x-ray at that time, and they slide it up on the board and the light goes on. He takes his pen out, he circles, and I'm all looking like this with my neck brace on because where you're broken stuff in your body because I got other broken parts and plates and screws. And I look over and I go, oh, that's where I broke my back in Brazil. And he goes, no, that's just beside it. This is where you broke your back here today. And my wife looks at me. She goes, oh, good. we broke her back again. So it was like not impressed whatsoever. So yeah, I knew, and I had retired the year before at 2000 at Texas Motor Speedway, but Eddie was talking me into coming back and doing the 500, which I was glad to do. But I'm not sure if I would have come back for another one, but I never used the word retirement. But I got the message from my wife at that point in time that we were pretty, we were pretty much done.
You also famously said, and I've this stuck with me for a long time. And you said when you're not thinking about racing every second of your day, and you're distracted by business opportunities or whatever else is you've now done in the rest of your life, that's when it's time to get out of the car.
Yep.
Because I'm not fully paying attention.
And you eat, breathe, and sleep it. And I tell these young drivers I'm working with now. And you're right. And I'm not sure when I said that, if it was to you or whatever I said that, but I was very much aware of that because you get involved with different things, and that I'm here in the city or back in Toronto and partnerships, and you get up and now you're working on other stuff, and you got to, and I realized it because I was going, you know what, I don't have time to go to the gym today. And I did that for a little while, and I thought it's not going to work like that.
Let's talk about second careers, because you just mentioned Eddie Cheever. I suspect you've got a different side of Eddie than most of us that have consumed Eddie Cheever over the years. But how did that work? Because your TV relationship was I don't think similar to, maybe it was similar to your off-air.
Eddie and I have become good friends, and that probably to a lot of people might seem a little bit strange. He lives around the corner from us, and my wife and I just had dinner with him before, and around Christmas time before we went to Florida. And but to go back to the downtown street course at Detroit, because you guys are going back to the street course, 1990, I'm now full-time. Eddie comes over to run with Chip Ganassi from Formula One. So, and we've obviously done a couple of races. We get to downtown Detroit, and I tell this story all the time. And if Eddie was here right now, he'd be so angry at me, but it's funny. So wherever I'm pitted close to pit out versus where he is. So we leave the old track at downtown Detroit. You come out, you made a right and a left, and you went down to a hairpin. So I go down there, and then Eddie has obviously been at the track with F1. He comes from mid pit or whatever it was, comes out there and just goes screaming down towards turn one, goes around the outside of a couple of us, but happens to drive over my front wing. And I get on the radio, and I say to Dick Karen, I go, "You're not going to believe this." I tell him what happened. He goes, "Okay, we got a wing waiting for you." So I'm going around dragging the wing and what have you, go around there. And the next couple of corners were a right and a right, and then double right before you make the back section. And that last up the hill right was where the Horton truck was parked when the Andretti's member hit it back in those days, hit it back into it. So anyways, I'm dragging around there. Just past there, I come up to Eddie's car. It's got a flat tire, and he's hobbling around. And because obviously when he drove over my wing, obviously it flattened the tire. So we go through the whole practice and stuff like that. And I go down to talk to him afterwards and go, "Hey," in the pit lane, I go, "Hey, what's up? You drove across my wing." "No, I didn't." I go, "Yeah, you drove across my wing and you broke the wing." "No, I had a problem with my tire. I drove slow and I came in here." I go, "Your tire was flat because you drove across my wing." And he goes, "No, I didn't." So that was the beginning of it. We did not talk to each other and probably aggravated each other, or we did aggravate each other because it was that mindset now on the racetrack for a long time. We get to Texas, and Eddie comes up to me, and like I said, we're good friends now. He comes up to me and he goes, "We probably need to make a truce on this," or whatever his words were at that point in time. "We can't do what we've done when we're starting to do this oval stuff anymore." And I said, "Oh, okay, great." He has his hand out, and I go to put my hand out. So you're admitting to driving over my wing?" "No, I'm not." But anyways, we laughed at it and we continued on. And then obviously we were fine. You have to have respect for people on the oval. So that turned into then talking to each other. And then the last year when I announced that I was retiring in 2000, that he said, "No, you got to continue and help me with the Infinity program," which I did actually. So, yeah. So anyways.
So no tough moments as broadcasters with each
other?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Plenty.
Yeah, I
of
would think so.
Plenty of them. It was actually, we had a lot of fun. But, you know, and ESPN sort of like the two analysts going back and forth a little bit anyways.
Yeah, but you were too nice.
Yeah.
You
too
were giving this
pleasant.
accent and
Yeah.
you sounded like you were.
But it was perfect because if we would walk around the garage area or even in the city having dinner or something like that, people will come up and they see the both of us. And then all of these people would look at him and go, why are you so mean to him? I mean, he's a great guy. Why are you like that? And he would be like this. So it was, and I would just stand there and just smile. And just smile. But no, he's a remarkable individual, not only from what he's done in the racetrack, for what he's got going on in his life with business right now. Remarkable individual, very successful, family man, and just enjoys his family and doing work and being quiet. And we get together often. We go over there and have dinner, and you know, he makes pasta because he makes it from scratch. And yeah, so we've become friends, which I would have told you if you had asked me that when we started having problems in Detroit way back then in 1990, that it would never happen. So
Well, not many things drive me crazy. The fact he's on the Borg Warner Trophy and you're not is one of them.
oh, so we go over. He gets and like I said, lives around the corner from me. So his trophies sits in the case at
Yeah, I
home.
know.
There's nothing. Very seldom. There's hardly anything. Sort of like our house too. I mean, you don't really see a whole lot of racing in our house. You know, maybe it was when I was driving or something like that, but my wife's in charge of decorating, obviously. So that stuff seems to get always moved down the hall a little bit. But no, he's very much not that way. So I got him to, we were over there with all our family one time, and I got him to bring the trophy out and then and put it on the kitchen counter, and the kids got to look at it and see it and all that sort of stuff. And I said, yeah, kids, you have to look at it now because Dad doesn't have one of those at home.
Yeah, very sad. By the way, Scott Dixon's house is similar in what you're describing. They have a little butler's pantry. Is that what you call that? Off the kitchen, which is basically where he gets to keep his trophies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kid you not. There's not another spot in the house where it looks like he's the most decorated race car driver in this series right now.
Yeah.
If Cheever wasn't the one you struggled with on the racetrack, you did the one time. Did you have somebody who was your nemesis who kind of got to you? Or just it was a good competitive rivalry with?
You know, I'm not sure because I was always trying to make sure I knew who I was around and size them up, and then understand who would give you a hard time, who would not. You know, one of the hardest guys to pass on the oval during the IRL series, and his good friend is Scott Sharp.
I was going to say, and there's two guys that most drivers want to pummel, and that's Scott Sharp and Eddie Cheever.
And there again, and then you know, and Eddie, when he was married with Kim, moved into just down the road from us, and then we started sharing a plane to go to places. Went on family vacations together. We were friends. We trained together and everything like that. But it still didn't matter. And I'm thinking now when I'm saying this to Pikes Peak, and you know, and just it made some plane rides home difficult every once in a while. But no, but I mean, and just because he would be very competitive like that, and it was you know, and that's how some people are. So you know, very good, very successful. But yeah, it was one of those things that when you look at people and they go, okay, maybe we're not going to try the outside line. Maybe we're going to look like we're going to try the outside line, but then we'll do in the inside line. You sort of want to get around them.
Let me give you another name who elicits a lot of emotion and might be the best one segment race car driver and should be on the Borg Warner Trophy, if not for a huge mistake, is Thomas Scheckter.
Yeah.
As good as anybody probably in the IRL era. Would you, at least for a one fuel stint?
For speed.
For
reading the racetrack to go fast, yes. For reading the racetrack to read the traffic to understand what cars are doing, no. I mean, when you're at the Speedway, you need to not only know what your car is doing, and even if it's good, make a small change for the next pit stop to see what it does. You don't want to get to the last pit stop and think, oh, what should I do? You need to know what you're going to do, and you need to understand what you want in the car. So you might make some changes during the day. And I always broke it up into, 100-mile segments, but you're working for that last 10 laps, 15, 20 laps or something like that. That's all you're working for all day. But the other thing you need to be doing is understanding where everybody else is. and where they're good on what turns and how the car affects it when the wind changes. You need to know as much about them as you do about you. And I'm not sure that he did that. I just think that he would, if you want somebody to put their foot on the gas, absolutely. And even Eddie and I have talked about this, that the fastest guy that Eddie said the speed was just amazing. Yeah, huge speed, but should have won. Absolutely.
You go back and if you want to get some entertainment, go if we can find the press conferences in the 2002 season when Scheckter was driving for Cheever.
Yeah.
And Buddy Rice was on that team for some of the races, and the way Cheever and Scheckter went at it was priceless television.
Yeah. Well, and then on that note there, I mean, there may have been times in the television booth during commercials where, you know, Eddie and I might be going back and forth each other on the air, where I may have turned around and mentioned Thomas Schechter's name just to get him wound up a little bit. So, you know,
actually,
it reminded me, it was sort of like Thomas, wasn't it, Eddie? Like when look at, I can't say what he would say, but yeah, that's what you.
Yeah, I got the pleasure of telling Thomas he had been fired by Eddie Cheever. Happened to see Eddie at Gateway before on a Thursday and said, yeah, he's done. I go, no, I don't think he's done. He's on his way over. No, he's done. The other thing that, I had one more point about Scheckter. Oh, one thing you're not given enough credit for, and I think for the room, we need to establish this. You really were the foundation from a driving standpoint of what Panther Racing became. And after you left, Hornish comes in, wins the back-to-back championships. Then his career goes and wins the Indy 500 and goes with Penske and then gets a NASCAR deal. But the foundation was laid with you and the team that you had, Doug Bowles, John Barnes,
Gary
Mike
Pettigo.
Griffith, Gary Pettigo. That group was a foundational piece of the IRL. And you won 3 races with them, big races. And I assume you take pride in really, I mean, obviously Hornish did what we now know Hornish to do, but the foundation for that program was really your part of the program.
Well, it was fun because you were in there just really when the walls are being painted to the shop, you know, and everything was being done. And you know, and there were some guys that you know, the team was being built, and one guy I wanted to bring along was Rocket, which was Kevin Blanche. And Rocket was at Fred Treadway's team. And he was thinking about looking and doing something different. And he was looking at a couple of different options.
So he was a chief mechanic.
Yeah, chief mechanic, and on my car. And he said, it's a new team. I'm not sure they'll be up and ready to go and what have you. So I met with him a lot. And then basically, and you have to do things in business, and motorsport is a business to make things happen. You know, because he lives on the north side, as you know, and I with his kids and everything like that. And so I don't want to call it a bribe, but I showed up one day with a trailer with a Sea-Doo on the back of it. And I said, I've got a hitch and everything. It's going on the back of your car. This is yours. Well, I didn't, no, I said, it's a gift. Oh, I said, but there's one stipulation. And he goes, okay, it's a deal. So that's how
Didn't know that.
That's how Kevin came to Panther Racing.
That's not how I got this gig with you.
Well, yeah. And guess what? Yeah. So
it's a different kind of a program.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is fun to do, and I think you do it with your young kids in your sport, drivers amaze me that they can do this. So you were telling me the story, and I want to see if you can do it. You bought 50 stopwatches, the old stopwatch kind, and you said, close your eyes and think through the racetrack and time yourself and see if you can mentally get through a lap and hit the stopwatch and see if it matches your actual time.
Right.
Do you think you could do that? If I said today you were running 39-second laps at Indy, could you shut your eyes, hit the stopwatch, think about driving Indy, and do you think you'd be close on time?
I think back in the day, probably so, but being out of the car so much time now,
you might be a second off.
I think probably like about 10 or something like that. Absolutely. But the interesting thing with that, because, you know, kids today are always on their phone, right? And then you got to have your eyes open to hit the start stop button. So I was telling Curt the story before. And so I order a bunch of these in from Amazon. And then my oldest son comes by one day and he looks at that and he goes, what is that? And I go, it's a stopwatch. And he goes, like on my phone? I go, yeah, like on your phone. He goes, no, really? I go, yeah. So anyways, that made me feel old. So then I'm feeling now with these 15-year-old kids that I have, and we have the largest F4 series in the world here in America. And I go and buy all these things, and I give them out at the Mid-Ohio race that particular year. This was last year when I started. I'm going to do the same thing again this year. So I have one of our staff turn around and hand all these stopwatches out, and I just took enjoyment of watching these kids get it put in front of them on the counter and go,
Oh, how do I use?
what is this? And they're talking to all their other peers in their room, right? And so anyways, I take it out and I explain to them the whole thing about what I wanted to do. I wanted them to slow the racetrack down or slow their mind down on the racetrack, because I go back and watch the videos after every event. We take the video cards from all the cars for all the races. I go back and watch them and help them develop into better drivers, smarter drivers, and what have you. And a lot of them are just overdriving the car, and the car's not working very well. Maybe it's understeering, oversteering, whatever it's doing. And I need to get them to understand that they need to make the car better, just not overdrive it like what they're used to doing coming out of go-karts. And so, yeah, so I got these stopwatches and explained to them in Mid-Ohio, I just want you to come through the last couple of turns, and whether you're in your motor home or your trailer or at a hotel at night, just close your eyes and hit the button, physically hit the button, because it's got a button on it, and just go around the racetrack and then hit it and stop it and then look at your time and all that sort of stuff. And I did it last year for the first time, and they all left and walked out of the drivers' meeting. And I said to my stewards that are with me, and I go, I don't think that went very well. No, I don't think it went. And about half of them came back the next day and went, thank you. Wow. So
Slowed them down.
It slowed them down, worked, and then I give them the books to go and do some training for working on cars and making cars work better. So it's fun for me because I get to see the result from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, much like I did with my son Michael, who raced cars in a couple of F4 races and other stuff. And
Before Sue asks the question,
I know
because she's ready. She's got all these questions. But one thing you like about your job is that you came from a family of teachers.
Yeah.
I think your wife was a teacher. Yes.
My mother's a teacher, my daughter's a teacher, and my sister is a teacher. Yeah.
So this is teaching young people to drive.
Mhm.
So bravo. It's all yours. I've
thank you.
worn him out.
I am the keeper of the stopwatch right now.
Yeah. I could feel the heat coming from the side, and I was watching Curt's eyes, and I go, she must be at the podium. So
We are at question and answer time now. So we are asking that you either use the microphone in front, or Jason will bring you a microphone. That's so the people watching from home can hear you. And it's also so that I can hear the question. So who has a question?
Well, it's kind of weird seeing you, Scott, up there, because you're not on television, as I've seen you over the years growing up. Growing up in Canada, you grew up in the Toronto area, hockey, big sport, but you came up during a time when you had guys like Paul Tracy, Jacques Villeneuve, and even guys like Miguel Duhamel and Superbikes coming up. What made it so special coming up in Canada at that time to make it on the world stage? Like, what made it so special?
well, in motorbikes, because we were in the motorcycle business and I used to ride bikes all the time. Those guys are amazing when you saw them at the Speedway, and I'd not been around them forever. And then you saw how fast they were going. It's just those guys are on a whole pedestal by themselves. Absolutely, without a doubt. Matter of fact, Paul Tracy came through my school. I taught him in karting and also, at my Formula Ford school, because I had a school at that point in time. Natural talent. And you could tell by noon hour on the first day that this kid was specially gifted, and we had a few of those guys up there, like Greg Muir also, I had to work at it hard, and those guys, had so much natural talent. It was beautiful to watch, really, in that sense. The success for drivers coming out of Canada, in the 80s, we had so many series running in Canada. I was involved in the Rothmans Porsche Turbo Cup Series. There was the Honda Michelin Series, the Canadian Tire Formula 2000 Series, the Players General Motors Series. I mean, all those things were sponsored either by alcohol or tobacco, but there was a lot of funding there. So the neat thing for it was they were all at events, so either it was at Motorsport Park or Saint-Jovite, sometimes at the Montreal Grand Prix. They were always taped and shown on CTV Wild World Sports, which is like, the biggest channel across Canada, the following weekend. It was good to be able to go out and get sponsorship. And it was a way to be able to drive dollars to the car or to the team so you could have something to drive. And that went on for probably 5, 6, or 7 years. And there's so many people coming through the feeder system at that point in time. They had an opportunity then to be able to hopefully branch out and go to Europe or go into the United States. So we were very fortunate that we had that. We don't have that in Canada right now. I've been living abroad since late 80s, but it's been, it's slowed down, but we still get some amazing talent coming out of there for the country that we have, for the smallest country as we are compared to the States. Very much so.
Oh, question way in the back.
How is your back now?
It's great with the exception when it gets cold and damp. So it's oddly enough, and here's the wild thing. And my wife looked at me and she said, after I gave her the smart aleck answer, she said, "I'm not very happy with you. That's not very funny." But my wife, and I was traveling, I'm not sure where I was. This is going on almost 4 years ago. My wife, and my daughter are involved in horses. My wife fell off a horse and broke her back. And and she didn't say anything about it until I got home from the weekend, and with the brace and all that sort of stuff. And I looked at it and going, "Is that my brace?" She goes, "No, that's mine." And I go, "What happened?" So she told me the story. And I said to her, and she explained what happened and all this sort of stuff. And she broke her back. And I said, "You should really leave breaking your back to the professionals," just like us.
Nice.
That didn't go over all that well. So yeah. So it was.
She's a nice lady too. All right, Jason, we're still right here in front.
Scott, it's nice to see you.
Hey,
Ted,
how are you?
good to see
Yeah.
Couple questions about driving on the ovals. During the qualifying at Texas, Townsend Bell and James Hinchcliffe were talking about something that I'd never heard before, but I've always wondered. It was about shortening the line around the course to gain fractions of a second.
Mhm.
The reason I mention this is that as we watch the 500 now, the common practice nowadays seems to be the cars come off turn 2 or turn 4, and then they immediately head toward the inside of the straightaway and then all the way back again. And I'm thinking, okay, if you're adding maybe 50 feet to your lap or, down the back stretch and again on the front stretch, that's 100 feet per lap times maybe 170 green flag laps. I did the calculations. That's over a lap of track distance that you're adding to a 500-mile race. So that's my first question. Then my second question is, and you're really qualified to answer this based on your close finish in 92, is when we have these late race red flags and now you've got a leader who's, everyone's going for the win at Indy. Now they're weaving all over the back stretch, all over the front stretch. When you were racing, that wasn't happening. What's different and what is the etiquette? What's the rule, if there is any rule? Because it seems like it's just completely different now than it was in your day.
It's interesting on the first one, even watching qualifying today at Indianapolis, a lot of guys come off the fourth turn and then, they're driving it down. And I do think it adds time onto it or distance onto it, if you will. It's a little bit different now because I think the stagger number, and that's the size difference between the rear tires. In our day, we used to run a stagger anywhere from 58 to 62 at Phoenix and somewhere in the 44 to 48 round range at Indianapolis. So, if you let go of the steering wheel, the car was going to end up going into the infield. What we used to do coming off there is that you didn't want to put force into the steering wheel, into the car, and try and keep the car going straight. You wanted to freewheel it off the corner. So you'd let the thing have its own guide and its own head, if you will. And then to a point where it started, you could sort of blend it into the road. And so we would come off and that you don't run beside the wall anyways because of the buffeting. But yeah, they're going down a lot further now. So I'm not sure that I understand it, and I'm no longer doing television, so I'm not asking that question. But, maybe it's something for the guys to sort of explain. For what you've explained there, it makes you really wonder. And I think the stagger is probably half of what it was back in the day, and that's because the cars are built different, their aerodynamics are different, what have you. I guess really now I have a hard time with our series, and we just came from NOLA, which has a very long straightaway. But I have to obviously lecture the kids on when you come out of the turn and you come down the straight, by our rules, you're allowed to make one move. And you make the one move and you need to stay there. So if they're starting to go and block and what have you, then we obviously have to deal with that with the steward's perspective. It's wild at Indy. I think it adds to the show. It adds to the television, if you will. Probably didn't want to be involved in it when I was on the racetrack, but when I was in the television booth, I'm like, okay, this is actually looking not too bad. Because obviously you're wearing a different hat at that point in time. But, our kids, young drivers, male, female, 15 years of age and up, really watch Formula One. And if it's accepted in Formula One and we're underneath the Formula One banner, the FIA banner, they question why we can't do it. Well, we're a training series. So that's why we have written in the FIA rules that I have to follow, is they're allowed to come out there and make one move as long as you're not impeding the progress of the car behind. So we can deal with that. I've watched F1 this year, and they've got that. There was a restart in race 2 where, the leader was sitting there and Verstappen, and they got to a restart and he's still weaving. No, actually it was Perez, I think, weaving, which you're not supposed to do that as soon as the safety car line 1 goes and what have you. And he's weaving and he takes off. And I think Fernando was second at that point in time. So by the rule, he probably should have been penalized. He wasn't penalized, obviously, at that level. So I'm not sure what IndyCar allows today.
Same thing. One move.
Yeah, one move. So one move. Well, I did that one move. Now I'm into a different one
Well,
move.
you got to do it first.
Yeah, exactly. And not impeding the
can't
progress. Yeah,
Can't be reaction.
right.
Action, not reaction.
Yeah.
Where's our
Yeah.
microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, right here in the middle back.
Kurt, I want to compliment you on your attire because God bless Robin Miller and his sweatshirts and
Yeah.
sweatpants. But Scott, you called the 2006 race with Sam and Marco. Explain what happened to Marco coming after off 4 and how that pass occurred. I mean,
I don't think that anybody has the answer for that. And maybe Marco would probably love to do that, and I guess I've known Michael since we were racing Formula Fords against each other, and even early days at the Montreal Grand Prix in the 80s. And obviously then he got into Super V and went a lot quicker to IndyCars than I did. But just knowing the pressure that's on Marco, and when we do our pick your driver to win the Indianapolis 500 for years, I'd go and look at guys that I thought should win it. But, in that year, I chose on air Marco, just because of the pressure that he would have and what have you. And it was interesting because I said to him after that, I said, I'm not going to choose you anymore. I was sorry for that. I mean, putting maybe a lot of pressure on you, but I looked at that and I thought he was actually going to win like everybody did. And I'll play into it a little bit about for me, and I'll take you back to 1992. I never understood why 1992 meant so much to so many people, because I always felt like I lost the race because you finished second. And, and the emotion that went into that day. As you know, in television, when you get to the last lap or going down the back stretch, the analysts are stepping away from the program, and the play-by-play is taking care of it. So it's almost like that at the beginning of the race and at the end of the race. So you get to sit back as a spectator for a little bit and enjoy it. And I was doing that and watching to see what was going to happen, like at the end of all races. And, so the play-by-play is coming and it's happening and what have you. And you think, gosh, Marco's going to win. Then obviously, as you saw, Sam comes through with that. But to live through that moment, even in the television booth, and then to the roar of the crowd and everybody standing up, and you could feel it in the pagoda, you can feel it in the building and everything like that. It was like, I was like, oh my God, that was the best race I've ever seen. I was living the moment, if you would. It was on the drive home that night, and the light switch came on, and I went, oh, I get 1992 now. It's taken from 1992 to 2006 to fully understand what everybody saw, because I just went through it and I felt bad for Marco. But it was the most amazing race, because of the finish that happened at. So that was why I felt like that.
That's a great answer.
I think we have one more question.
Can you take us back to the split and tell us what your opinion was, what your thought about it was, and maybe what other drivers were thinking about at that time and how it changed your future?
I guess disbelief probably was what was happening in there. You know, you heard some stuff that's going on as a driver. You're not at the level of discussions and talks that are going on. It certainly affected my roadmap of what I was going to do, because I was in my mid-30s at that point in time, really. And I thought that, and you knew that there was so much bad relationship between the two sides that it wasn't going to be for 1 year. It wasn't going to be for 2 years. So I was with Derek Walker and running the kart series. And I need to make the change from 1996 to 1997 into the IRL series because I need to go to the Indianapolis 500. I knew that I had a few years left to go ahead and do that. If I was in my 20s, maybe I would have viewed it differently. In 96, we were funded Valvoline, I think, and, you know, teams of, and we had a great package together. And it was very difficult for me to go ahead and need to make that move. And I went over to Fred Treadway's team because Ari was there, and Ari called me, and that's how I ended up there. But I had to go to the IRL route for the Indy 500. The Indy 500 is why I think we all go IndyCar racing. You know, there's no doubt about that. So it affected it. And what year did they get back together? I can't even recall. It
Well,
was
slowly, and
slowly.
when Roger came in
Yeah.
2001, and then
Yeah.
Chip in 02, and
Right.
by
Yeah.
08, it was.
Yeah. So I just knew in my lifespan that I had behind the wheel, it wasn't going to get back together again. So, you know, that's probably the most often asked question about the split and why. And I'm not sure that I'm versed to be able to give that answer, but we hear so much about it. But it certainly slowed the progress down, I think, of IndyCar racing at that point in time, because, you know, we were on our way to Australia and Brazil and all those other places we were going. There's no doubt that F1 was worried about where we are. Yeah, it was a shame from that standpoint, that's for sure.
And 95 is painful, but what an entertaining race that was.
And 95 was, you know, and yeah, I know we weren't going to get off the stage when you're bringing that up. But,
Sorry, friend.
yeah, so I'm sitting over there. Sorry, I started to move a little bit. I thought something's coming up with
No,
this.
no,
I know
no.
where we're going with that one.
It was just a great, it was
It was fun.
Vassar
And-
led, Pruitt led, you led,
Yeah.
Villeneuve led. It was good fun.
And, you know, and I knew we had a good car, and we had to make some changes throughout there, and working with Steve Horn was just wonderful. You know, and he's so calm and cool on the radio. And I already told you the little dialogue that we had going on. When
Let's
he
leave
said
it there.
that was
Let's leave
fun.
it at
But
there.
92, you know, I was under a learning program. I mean, I didn't have enough experience to obviously really beat little Al. 97, Ari was a little quicker for me than that day, and more because of wing configuration on the car. And, you know, so I always say that he was faster. 97 didn't have enough experience in 92. And 95, I just never agreed with. So it is what it is. And when that happened in 95, probably back in 92, 92, I guess I felt comfortable that, okay, I think I know how to make a car work around here. I know how to understand the track, understand the race. And I felt confident. The next year in 93 went back, we had a Ford engine. I can't remember where we qualified, second row maybe or something. I mean, you know, I felt confident that I could get up the front and have a shot at winning. So 92 was painful. And then, you know, we didn't have a great year in Budweiser 94, although we won Michigan. And, but you still felt confident that if you had the equipment, you could work with the team and have a shot at being up front. And if we were ever running, we were usually somewhere around there. And so I always felt confident of that. And then 97, still thought, okay, I'm still coming back and still have a shot at being able to win it. And then when you sort of decide, okay, it's time to leave, there's disappointment there. There's no doubt about it, you know, because, you know, I had my office built, and there's a shelf that I had built that's where the baby Borg Warner was going to go. And, you know, so, and I wouldn't leave mine in the case like Eddie does, that's for sure. You know, it's just, I just watched the Indy 500 growing up, and from Canada. I mean, we all sit in front of the television if we weren't at a go-kart race, and otherwise we'd be listening to it on the radio. It's just you know, when my stints in Europe, fortunate to drive for the Audi factory in Germany and the Porsche factory in Germany. And and have great teammates like Bob Wallach and Hans Stuck, you know, just guys like that were on the team. And when I was running Audi over here, Hurley Haywood, learning so much from all those guys, but probably didn't get to stand the podium at Indy, but standing on the podium when we were second class, third overall at Le Mans was still reminds me today just how cool things can feel when you get announced and you walk out on the big platform and just like F1, all the fans come and storm the pit lane and what have you. So had some fun times, you know, but the key thing was definitely the Indianapolis 500. And and then the other 30-second quick story on that one. After 92, we had Sports Illustrated come to do an article, and we were at House in Canada at that point in time. And in my office there, I took that picture, and I tell Al this all the time. I took that picture and turned it 180 degrees.
Oh.
And so it was sitting behind my desk. And so the guy from Sports Illustrated, he came and got there in the late morning, about 10 o'clock, because he flew in from New York. And then we went and had lunch, and we came back, sat in the office. So he's going to leave to fly back out that day. And he goes, at the end, he goes, just have one last question. Said, sure, what's that? And he goes, do you know your picture's upside down behind you? I go, yeah, the blue and silver car is now leading the blue and white car. I think it works out perfectly. So yeah, he thought that was crazy.
Well, thank you very much. Remember, you can go downstairs and preview the artwork. I'd like to thank Curt and Scott for coming to Indiana Landmarks this evening.
Pleasure.
You have given us an excellent talking track, and Donald Davidson would be very proud. Thank you.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah. If
And
I
Doug
may
and
add,
Scott
sorry,
will
if I-
be here for a few minutes if you have further questions. Thank you very much.
I just also want to thank Curt because like his 37th year, someone that understands the sport, has respect from everybody, from the garage area to all the team owners to all the everybody's now working for the Speedway, obviously. But I told this story yesterday on Fox 59 that it's interesting because when I came to the Indianapolis 500, obviously, you know, you hear about the Bob and Tom show and all that sort of stuff, and that they were so racy at that point in time. But if you wanted to know what was going on at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, even as a driver and in the garage all the time, you got up the next day and got the Indianapolis Star and read Curt's article because he had the pulse and everything. So when they said we were doing this, I was praising. So thank you.
And I dress better than Robin too, I'm told.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I miss him. Tremendous guy. Thank you all for
Thank you
coming
all
out tonight. It's enjoyable to do this. Thank you. Thank you.